Broadcasting live from the Garden State, it's Real Sports Talk with Kenny Kluska on the Damage 365 Radio Network.
Why, hello there, everybody, and welcome to episode number 73 of Real Sports Talk with Kenny Kluska. Of course, I'm your host, Kenny Kluska, here to provide you with another quality episode for the 73rd time. Today's episode will mostly be going over the MLB All-Star Game. It's coming up soon. I believe it's July 12th. So we have that coming up. Fan voting is almost complete. So besides a few positions, for the most part, it looks pretty clear who will be starting the All-Star Game, and I'll look at both leagues and see how the fans are doing, whether the guys leading the votes are the person who really deserves to be starting in the Midsummer Classic. We'll get to that shortly. First, let me shout out two of my avid listeners of the show, Alex and Keith. Thank you so much for listening all the time. Now, they want me to talk about NASCAR. Maybe one day I will, but always remember Dale Earnhardt forever. Thank you guys for listening, though. Appreciate it. Maybe one day you'll get your wish, and I'll talk a little bit about NASCAR. But today, before we get into the All-Star Game, that'll encompass most of today's show. Real quick, go over some NBA stuff. A couple big trades happened in the NBA this past week, including my New York Knicks trading for former MVP Derrick Rose. Is he the same player that won MVP? No. Anyone who knows Derrick Rose knows he's been ravaged with injuries over the past few seasons. But last season did play 66 games, did not put up, MVP numbers like he did in 2011. But, still a huge upgrade for the Knicks at the point guard position, where they started Jose Calderon much of the past two seasons. So huge upgrade there. Also got Justin Holiday and a 2017 second-round pick. In return, they sent the Chicago Bulls center Robin Lopez and two point guards, Jose Calderon and last season's rookie Jerian Grant. At first I was kind of on the fence about the trade. Robin Lopez became a very solid center, especially toward the second half of the season. Knicks actually had one of the better front courts, despite a 30-52 record with Melo, Porzingis, and Lopez. Just the backcourt struggled mightily during the course of the season, thus the, substandard record. But just was so obvious that they needed a point guard upgrade. One of the guys who they may have been looking for, Jeff Teague, had gotten traded earlier in the day to the Indiana Pacers. That was a three-team trade where the Pacers sent George Hill to the Jazz, and the Jazz sent the number 12 pick to the Atlanta Hawks. Hawks pretty much were forced to do it. They have Dennis Schroeder as well on the roster, and Schroeder was not happy in a backup role. So he will now be the starting point guard for the Hawks entering this upcoming season. Now, of course, going back to the Knicks, they are on the market for a center. Supposedly their top prospect is Joakim Noah, of course, from the Bulls, good friends with Derrick Rose, so possibly could help recruit Noah to be the newest center for the New York Knicks. Was injured much of last season, but was a first-team All-NBA performer only 2 seasons ago in the 2013-14 season, when he also won Defensive Player of the Year. Other centers in the free agent market include Dwight Howard, Pau Gasol, Hassan Whiteside, and Al Horford. Whiteside and Horford and Howard could all possibly command a max salary. It's definitely going to be an interesting free agency. Free agency is coming up on July 1st, right around the corner, just 5 days away. On Friday is when NBA free agency begins, and teams can begin talking to free agents about signing with their team. So definitely interesting part of the season. Of course, the Knicks also have a shooting guard hole. Aaron Aflalo opted out of his contract, and he wasn't necessarily a great starting shooting guard to begin with, especially towards the end of last season when he was actually benched in favor of Sasha Vujacic. Another big trade that actually happened on draft day, Oklahoma City Thunder sending Serge Ibaka to the Orlando Magic in exchange for Victor Oladipo, Ersan Ilyasova, and Domantas Sabonis, the son of former Portland Trailblazer great Arvydas Sabonis. Definitely, at least in my eyes and a lot of people's eyes, it seems like that trade is advantage Thunder. Ibaka, of course, at one time was an elite shot blocker, still a very good shot blocker, but this was a guy for a couple seasons who was averaging nearly 4 blocks a game, and I believe each of the past 2 seasons he hasn't even averaged 2. Hasn't been as much of a scorer, of course, when you have Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook on your team. Not necessarily a lot of room to score many more points when, both of those guys are taking 20-25 shots a game, but seems to have been regressing stats-wise. Of course, he's still, I believe, 27 or 28 years old, so we'll have a fresh start with the Orlando Magic. Whether this trade has any effect as to whether Kevin Durant goes back to the Oklahoma City Thunder remains to be seen. We don't really know what happens, inside the locker room if Durant was close with Ibaka. Apparently the Thunder really didn't discuss the trade with Durant. They just went and did it. They have needed a shooting guard. They have Andre Roberson, who had been starting. Oladipo is an upgrade over him, or he can play a 6-man role where he gets 30-35 minutes a game. He's an upgrade over Dion Waiters as well. So Ersan Ilyasova, good stretch for, hit the 3-pointer, and Sabonis, the 10th pick in this season's draft. So it definitely looked like the Thunder got the better of that trade, but, still remains to be seen. And, of course, Sabonis was the 11th pick, but, of course, a lot rides on whether Kevin Durant re-signs with the Thunder or not. Apparently, the first 3 teams he will meet with on July 1st are the Thunder, Spurs, and Warriors. Last season's top 3 teams in the Western Conference. Teams such as the Knicks and Celtics also hope to believe that they have a chance to sign him as well. So that will be Friday. I'm sure on next week's show I'll have a lot to talk about regarding NBA free agency. I read today that Hassan Whiteside wants to make his decision right on July 1st where he is signing. I'm sure there'll be other players who decide, within a short period of time as well. So, next week's show, July 3rd, I should have more insight as to what is going on in free agency. But that's next week's show. As I mentioned, let's discuss the All-Star Game and the fan voting. Midsummer Classic is coming up rather shortly in about 2 weeks. Fan voting is almost complete, so we have a fairly good idea as to who will be starting in the All-Star Game, of course, barring injuries. So let's get started. We'll start with the American League. If you remember last year, it was a ton of Royals who were starting in the All-Star Game, including guys who probably didn't deserve it, like Alcides Escobar. This year, only a couple Royals currently are in the starting slots. Let's start with catcher. Salvador Perez is one of those catchers, and he has a commanding lead over Matt Wieters. So, unquestionably, Salvador Perez will be the starting catcher in the AL, and I'm going to agree with that. I don't even really think anyone's close to Perez in the AL catcher-wise. Perez banged .298, and all the stats I mentioned are going into today. .298 average, 12 homers, 15 doubles, 36 RBIs. Also has been stellar behind the plate in throwing out 51.4% of base stealers, and he's only made one error on the season. Was a Gold Glove winner last year. Salvador Perez, pretty much an obvious choice for who should be starting at the catcher position in the American League. First base, we have another Royal, Eric Hosmer. A little over 2 million votes, pretty large lead over Miguel Cabrera, who's second. A little less than 1.5 million votes in the last fan vote counting. This is pretty much a toss-up between the two. I would give the slight advantage to Miguel Cabrera. Slight, like ever so slight. But I really don't have a problem with Eric Hosmer, getting voted in as the starter. Comparing the numbers, very close. Hosmer, .307 average, 12 homers, 14 doubles, 40 runs, 44 RBIs, 4 stolen bases as well. Miguel Cabrera, slightly lower average, .296, but he also has a higher on-base percentage and slugging percentage than Hosmer. 16 homers, 16 doubles, 41 runs, and 45 RBIs. So, very close decision between the two. I'm going with one of the all-time great hitters in Miguel Cabrera. Another guy to mention, maybe Chris Davis. 17 homers on the year, but just a .236 batting average. So he's really third place. So I'm going to say first base is a wrong decision, but just barely. Like I said, not really, a crazy choice to pick Hosmer over Cabrera. Second base, and both these guys could be seen as MVP candidates. Been two of the better players in all of baseball so far this season. We got Jose Altuve with a little over 1.6 million votes, according to the last fan vote. And then we have Robinson Cano, who has slightly over 1 million votes, so over a 600,000 vote lead. Altuve should definitely be starting. And I agree with the fans. Again, very close. Cano, what a bounce-back season he has had. He had such an awful start to last season, but post-All-Star break, he was stellar, and he has continued that play going into today. .299 average, 19 homers, 18 doubles, 5 triples, and 53 RBIs. Jose Altuve, though, leading the American League with a .348 batting average, 13 homers, 23 doubles, 54 runs, 44 RBIs, and 18 stolen bases. One of the big reasons I would pick Altuve over Cano is the on-base percentage difference. Altuve .427 to Cano's .356, but both are having awesome years. I just believe Altuve's been a little better. Other guys to quickly mention who have had great years as American League second baseman: Ian Kinsler, .297 average, 14 homers, 8 stolen bases, and 59 runs scored. And Dustin Pedroia, .305 average, 7 homers, and 20 doubles. But agree with the fans. Jose Altuve. Third base, we got Manny Machado leading with over 1.6 million votes. Josh Donaldson, last season's American League MVP, currently at second place in the last fan voting, a little over 1.1 million votes. I'm going to have to agree with the fans once again, and, maybe Machado shouldn't even be listed as a third baseman, even though, that's been